Hey y'all, welcome to Erik Bets Fights. I am Erik. You probably could have figured that part out. I haven't put out a video in a couple days, so I figured I better pop on and get something out. I know it's already Tuesday, so we're a little late on this one, but we're going to go ahead and do a recap of UFC 269. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of start at the bottom of the card. We'll go through and talk about each fight a little bit, and then I will also let you know the bets that I had and how those bets went. We won't bury the lead. We'll go ahead and just talk about the bets overall first. We did have a losing night again. That puts us at 2 losing events in a row, which is, I think, the first time I've had 2 losing events in a row since I started tracking my bets. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but so we ended up minus 4.6 units total after UFC 269. I do already have some bets figured out for this weekend's card, which is Derek Lewis versus Chris Daukaus. I'll probably put those out in a separate video, but I do have some of my bets figured out there. But let's go ahead and recap UFC 269 a little bit. First fight of the night was Jillian Robertson versus Priscilla Cachoeira. That was kind of a crazy fight, if only because we saw Priscilla Cachoeira very clearly and very intentionally eye gouge Jillian Robertson at least once, if not twice. That's definitely not something that we see a whole lot. We see a lot of unintentional eye gouges, and there have been intentional eye gouges in the past. John Hess eye gouged Andy Anderson way back in the day. We have seen that, but it's been a long time. I did have Jillian Robertson in a parlay, and I had 4 units on that parlay. I'll talk about what the other piece of that parlay was a little bit later when we get there. But Jillian Robertson did defeat Priscilla Cachoeira by submission, rear naked choke in round 1, which is pretty much how we expected that fight to go. We knew it was either going to be Robertson by submission or Cachoeira by KO, and Robertson by submission was the much more likely outcome. However, Robertson got up as high as like minus 400 as a favorite, and I do think that was definitely way too high. I don't think Robertson should be minus 400 against anyone. I do like her. I think she's a good fighter, but when I put her in the parlay, she was around minus 280, and even that I thought was a little bit of a stretch, but I did it anyway. The next fight, Tony Kelly defeated Randy Costa by TKO toward the end of round 2. The breakdown of this fight was pretty straightforward. Everybody seemed to think Randy Costa is either going to finish early, or if Randy Costa doesn't get the finish in round 1, he might be dead in the water. And he didn't super gas out like people thought he would, but he definitely wasn't as effective as the fight went on. Unfortunately, I did have Randy Costa in a parlay, which of course was busted right away there. I had him in a parlay with Sijara Eubanks, who's fighting on this upcoming card this weekend. That was one of those situations. See, this is a thing I need to stop doing. This is a throwback from I've been betting MMA fights for many years, for a long time, but I've never done it seriously until kind of recently. I didn't actually do tape study. I would just kind of wiki cap, and I would listen to breakdowns, listen to different podcasts, and kind of make my picks that way. And one thing that I've always done is, in an attempt to beat line movement, I'll look way ahead at an event, and a lot of times I'll throw together a super square parlay. I'll just grab a couple big favorites and parlay them without doing any tape study, without doing anything. I'm just doing it way ahead of time, like, whatever. We're going to throw these 2 together and bet them. That's what I did here. That's the only reason I ended up throwing Randy Costa in a parlay. This is a practice that I need to get away from. I'm so used to doing it that I still do it, and now that I'm actually putting in the time and the research, I shouldn't do that anymore. But it was a nice performance from Tony Kelly. If the narrative becomes Costa death gassed, then it kind of takes something away from Kelly, and I don't think we should, because Kelly looked great. He never gave Costa a chance to get his game going at all. Tony Kelly was in Randy Costa's face right from the start of that fight. He won the first round, never even let Costa get that kind of venomous first round game going that he's kind of known for. Next fight was Ryan Hall, who defeated Derek Minner by unanimous decision. That was my detailed breakdown video for last week. I put out a breakdown of that fight. I thought that was a really fascinating fight. It did go, somewhat how we thought it was going to go, I guess. I kind of thought that Hall would find a submission. I did recommend a bet on the under 2.5 there, because I thought that fight was going to end. That's definitely one thing that I was not expecting it to go decision. I figured either Minner was going to, potentially find a knockout like Poirier did, which I didn't think was very likely, or Minner was going to, do his thing where he punches his way in and finds that guillotine. Not likely you're going to choke out Ryan Hall, but could happen. Derek Minner's a good grappler as well. Or I thought Minner was just going to keep crashing into the pocket and putting himself in situations where he was grappling with Hall. Hall was going to get to that 50-50 and find a leg lock. He never was able to find the leg lock, but it was a very clear win for Ryan Hall. A nice performance. And I'm glad Ryan Hall's around. He's just an interesting fighter. He's such a throwback to the old days. He's really only got, besides his kicking game on the feet, he's really only got his grappling game. He's not a well-rounded mixed martial artist, but he's able to make his game work, and it's just kind of fascinating. I love to watch it. Next fight, Erin Blanchfield defeats Miranda Maverick by unanimous decision, 30-27 from all three judges. That was an awesome fight. That was really cool to see. After watching tape on that fight, I thought it was going to be super close. The odds were suggesting it was going to be super close. My kind of basic breakdown of it was Blanchfield was probably the more technically skilled fighter, but that Maverick was going to be stronger, more physical, that sort of thing. But I tweeted about this during this fight because you hear a lot of handicappers and even the commentators on the events talk about this. I hate when people assume that you can tell how strong a fighter is by looking at them. During a fight, commentators will look at someone like Maverick, who's all bricked up and muscular looking, and say, "Oh, well, Maverick is much stronger than Blanchfield." And guys, what somebody's muscularity looks like, can it be an indicator of strength? Sure, but you really can't judge it based on that. You really can't look at a muscular person and a not muscular person and be like, "Oh, that person is stronger." It doesn't work that way. There can be people who don't look strong at all who are quite strong, and there can be people with that show muscle and it isn't any go muscle, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that beach muscle doesn't necessarily mean somebody's strong. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing to throw in there. But yeah, I stayed away from that fight because I thought it was going to be super close. But if you were on Blanchfield, nice work, good call. The next fight, Andre Muniz defeats Erik Anders by armbar in round 1. This was actually the first bet I made on this card. The first fight that I taped for last weekend's card was this fight, Muniz versus Anders. And after watching tape on that fight, I was personally capping Muniz at like maybe a -175 favorite or so. What I do is I don't look at the odds, or I try not to anyway. I try to do my tape study before I see the odds so that the odds aren't affecting my decisions at all. So I do my tape study, I take my notes on each fighter, and then what I do is I type up a little thing in my spreadsheet, sort of on how I would line the fight. This is kind of what my breakdown is, and this is how I would personally line the fight. And then I go look at the actual odds to see if there's any value there. I was lining Muniz at about -175. I pulled up the odds and saw that he was -140, so I dropped a bet on that right away. And he came through. He came through very easily. I know a lot of people were saying that they didn't necessarily think Muniz was going to be able to take Anders down. Anders does have good takedown defense. He's a strong physical guy, strong hips, that sort of thing. But in some of Muniz's previous fights, we had seen him come with a really, really nice, fast, just sort of reactionary double leg takedown. And I agree that he probably would have struggled to get Anders down if he had tried to work against the fence. If you try to clinch with a strong guy like Anders and try to work on taking him down there, his strength is really going to come into play. But if you've got that fast reactionary double leg takedown like that and you're just in on the guy's hips in a split second, that strength doesn't really come into play there. And Muniz was able to find that reactionary double very quickly and take Anders down and submit him. So that was really nice to see. It's going to be cool to see where Muniz goes from here. He's very talented, and he's an exciting prospect, I think. Next fight was Bruno Silva defeats Jordan Wright. TKO punches round 1, 1:28. Everybody was on the under here, and the fight doesn't go to decision here, and that kind of thing. We had 2 units on this fight to go under 1.5 rounds. We got that at -140, so that hit very easily. Not a lot of people were picking a side here. I did see some people parlaying Bruno Silva, but most people were just going for the under here because if Jordan Wright loses, it's within the first couple minutes of the fight by knockout. If Jordan Wright wins, it's within the first couple minutes of the fight by knockout. So it was like, one way or another, somebody's going to sleep here, and that's exactly what happened. Next fight, Tai Tuivasa defeated Augusto Sakai by knockout punches around 2:26 seconds. We stayed away from that one. That was one of those high variance heavyweight fights for me where I was just like, both guys are pretty powerful, but they're also pretty sloppy, and I didn't feel comfortable picking a side in that one, and I also didn't feel comfortable picking a total because, yeah, they're both powerful, but we always see those heavyweight fights where guys tire out and it just turns into a slog, and I saw this fight like, it could be a knockout, but it could turn into one of those drawn-out 15-minute slogs as well, so it was a stay away for me. We didn't have any money on that one. Next fight, Dominic Cruz defeats Pedro Munoz by unanimous decision. We did have a bet here. I took just a straight bet for 2 units on Dominic Cruz at -105, which was kind of dumb because I didn't think about it until later, but I really should have taken Dominic Cruz by decision. I felt good about him winning the fight, but if you're going to bet on Dominic Cruz, you bet on him by decision. And I think getting him by decision was like +175 or something, so we would have gotten a much better number. But that's one of those things. Part of the reason I make these videos is, hey, what did we learn? What are we going to do different next time? And sometimes I pull the trigger on a spot a little too quickly without really thinking about the different angles. What are the other ways that I can play this? Rather than just playing it straight up, am I going to get better value by looking at it another way? So, and that's another thing is, like I said, I'm new to taking all of this seriously. I see this content that I'm putting out not as like you're learning from a gambling expert or anything like that. I'm a longtime MMA fan. I've been watching the sport for 20 plus years. I feel like I am a little bit of an expert when it comes to just MMA history and lore and just knowing the sport, but I am not an MMA gambling expert. I see this as you're watching me learn how to do this. So if you're tailing me, do so with caution because I'm not an expert. This is more of a, hey, I'm Erik and I like doing this, and maybe you'll come along for the ride while I learn how to get better at MMA gambling. That's kind of what we're doing here. All right, next fight was Josh Emmett defeats Dan Ige by unanimous decision. Most people thought this fight was gonna be a finish. Emmett's got that crazy power. He did knock down Ige, if I remember correctly. I think Josh Emmett now has knockdowns in like 7 fights in a row or something like that. I don't know if that's a UFC record, but it's got to be close. When he lands, people fall down. We stayed away from that one. Yes, we did. That was another one where there was just too many question marks, too much variance for me. I didn't feel like I had a strong read there, so we stayed away. Next fight, Sean O'Malley defeats Raulian Paiva, TKO punches round 1, 4:42. This was a really nice performance from Sean O'Malley. Obviously, people have strong opinions about O'Malley. A lot of people don't like him. They just don't like him as a person, and I can understand that. He's pretty annoying, and I get how he can get on your nerves, but I think we're getting to the point where we can't question the kid's abilities anymore. A lot of people have said, yeah, Sean O'Malley's good, but how good is he, and that sort of thing. And I think we're starting to see that he's pretty darn good. I mean, we're not really going to know until he tests himself against some of the fighters toward the top of the division, but I think Sean O'Malley's pretty talented, and maybe we won't get to see him test himself against the top of the division too soon. I don't know. He seems to enjoy doing that thing where he's just like, hey, I get paid the same to fight nobodies, and that way I get to build up my record and make money and I don't get hurt. But now, as he moves up toward the top of the division, I'm guessing he'll quit thinking quite so much that way. But nice win for Sean O'Malley there. We didn't have a bet on that fight at all. Next was Kai Kara France defeated Cody Garbrandt by TKO punches round 1, 3 minutes 21 seconds. This was a fight where I had a lean that I didn't end up playing. I almost played Kai Kara France here. He was at about +150 when I first started looking at the line, and then it got steamed a little bit, and by the time I really kind of was thinking about pulling the trigger, he was more like plus 120 or something like that maybe, and I just didn't feel that great about it. So that was one of those spots that I just about took, but didn't quite end up doing it. But yeah, I mean, it was Cody Garbrandt's first fight at 125. He's lost 5 of his last 6 now or something like that, and a lot of people are talking about, I mean, he's not that old of a guy, but what does he do? Does he retire now? Does he leave the UFC and go to another league? I don't know what you do with Cody Garbrandt. he was a guy who looked like he had all the talent in the world at one point, and he just can't seem to find those wins anymore. Next fight, Jeff Neal defeats Santiago Ponzinibbio by split decision. We did have a bet here, a bet that lost. I put 2 units on Santiago Ponzinibbio at -110. You know, after I did the tape study for this one, I saw sometimes you end up creating narratives in your own head that you follow, and then you watch the fight and it's like, oh, I was kind of incorrect about that. I misread that, you know, as I was watching the tape study, I misread it. I created a narrative in my head that was incorrect, whatever that might be. But from the tape study I saw, I thought that, I was like, you know, Jeff Neal's output really falls. I saw Jeff Neal, you know, as the fight moved into round 3, spending a lot of time with his, you know, just hanging his arms down, kind of stepping back, taking a break, not really throwing anything. And I thought, well, if, you know, if this fight goes long, which I thought there was a good chance it would, I thought that Ponzinibbio would have the better output. I thought that Ponzinibbio, so he would be winning on the numbers and also probably just on the optics, as Jeff Neal is kind of hanging his arms down and stepping backwards and almost like taking breaks in the fight because he's tired. And we didn't necessarily see it play out that way. I mean, Ponzinibbio did really crank up the output for a little while there in the 3rd round toward the end, but it was just too little too late, so we lose 2 units there. And then we've got one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. Juliana Pena defeats Amanda Nunes to win the women's bantamweight title. It was a rear naked choke submission, 3 minutes and 22 seconds into round 2. I did have some leans here. I almost sprinkled on Juliana Pena, but even if I had, those sprinkles wouldn't have won because I wasn't looking at round 2. My read on this fight was kind of how everybody's read is on most of Amanda Nunes' fights, and that's that we have seen her struggle a lot with her cardio if a fight goes into the later rounds. However, most fighters aren't able to survive that first round with her. She's so potent early in the fight, and I really just think she intimidates a lot of her opponents. People go in there and they're already kind of intimidated. They feel her power and they're just like, whoa, I can't hang with this, and they just kind of crumple. They're not able to stick it out. My read on this fight was that if Juliana Pena was able to survive that early onslaught, I could see her winning by submission later in the fight, but I was going to sprinkle on rounds 3, 4, and 5. So even if I had done what I was thinking about doing, we wouldn't have won anyway, because she did find that submission, but she found it much earlier. And I was going to do like 0.2 unit sprinkles. It wasn't anything. I'm not trying to say like, oh, I called Juliana Pena here as the winner. I was not picking her to win at all. I just thought, you know, the numbers on those sprinkles were pretty enticing, but I didn't end up pulling the trigger there anyway. Oh, and also Amanda Nunes was who closed out that parlay that we had with Jillian Robertson. So even though Jillian Robertson won, we lost that parlay there. And that parlay had 4 units on that. So as far as the what did we learn category here that we do in these videos, what we learned is not to go too crazy with the unit size, and probably not to mess around too much with parlaying fighters that are at -800. And also, this parlay was my square parlay that I did way in advance. Same thing that I talked about with Costa. I did that same thing here. This was before watching tape or anything. I just looked at it. I saw that -800 on Nunes. Obviously, that's a crazy number that I should have stayed away from. But I was like, you know what? It's going to get even worse. And it did. I mean, she ended up at least -1,000, I think. I don't recall what the closing line was, but so I jumped on it. I was really confident in Robertson to win, or pretty confident, and Nunes, you know, everybody's just always confident she's going to win, so I didn't even think about it. So I was like, I put -800, -280, put them together in a parlay, put 4 units on it. So we lost 4 units. Yeah, I don't know about these 4 unit. I do 3 unit parlays once in a while. I think this is the biggest parlay I've done, because I was like, how are they going to lose? But now we know they can lose, and they did lose, and we lost 4 units there. So we definitely need to keep a closer eye on that moving forward. And then the final fight of the night, Charles Oliveira defeats Dustin Poirier by submission rear naked choke about a minute into round 3. What do you do with Charlie Oliveira? Good old Chucky Olives. The guy's just awesome. I mean, he has one of the greatest stories, I think, in UFC history. You know, he's been around forever. He's fought in the UFC, 30 sometimes. He's got the most submissions. But the most interesting part about his story, I think, is that he was around for so long and was kind of a middle of the road guy. You know, he besides the fact that he was racking up a lot of submissions over time, he wasn't really anybody that fans saw as a special fighter necessarily. He went something like 10-8. Initially in his run in the UFC, he was almost a 500 fighter, and now he's won something like 10 or 11 fights in a row. So I mean, he's a great example of that. If you keep working hard, you just don't go away. You keep doing your thing. You know, I mean, he could have easily been one of those fighters that either got washed out of the organization or kept just kind of toiling away at that 500 level, but he kept working hard. He kept making improvements. He kept learning. He kept finding ways to patch the holes in his game, because he used to have really obvious holes in his game. And one of those holes was that he didn't seem to have the heart to stick it out when he got into difficult positions, when he got into difficult situations. He was a guy who would kind of look for that door when he found himself being the nail rather than the hammer, and we don't see that from him anymore. So you sometimes hear people say that you can't coach heart, you can't learn that and that sort of thing, but I'd say Chucky Olives is evidence to the contrary of that, because he's a guy that didn't appear to have a lot of heart. But if you think about, I mean, what is heart? Where does it come from? It's confidence, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. You know, you're going to fold in difficult situations if you don't have the confidence to believe that you can win. And where does part of confidence come from? Part of confidence comes from having the skills, knowing that you have that ability. And I think, I'm just speculating here. I don't know the guy, but I think Chucky Olives just over time was able to improve his skills and patch those holes in his game. And he became a more confident fighter because he had the skills to back up that confidence. And that confidence led to him having more heart in the cage. I don't know. It's a possibility, but bummer to see Dustin Poirier lose there. I mean, he's, one of the good guys of the sport, of course. So is Oliveira, though. I mean, I saw so many people on Twitter leading up to this fight like, oh, I'm so sad that one of these guys has to lose, because they're both, good guys of the sport that have been around forever, have paid their dues, and everybody kind of loves the guys. So that's awesome. Let me just pull up my bets here again and make sure I didn't miss anything. So we lost, I'll run back through them. We lost 2 units on Santiago Ponzinibbio. We had a 2-unit bet on Dominic Cruz. We won 1.9 units there. We had a 1.5 unit bet on Andre Muniz, won 1.07 units. I had that 4-banger on with Nunes and Robertson parlay, lost 4 units there. I had 2 units on Costa Eubanks parlay, lost 2 there on Costa. 2 units on Bruno Silva and Jordan Wright to go under a round and a half. That we won 1.43 units there. And then I did have a unit on Hall and Minner to go under 2.5. I really thought that one was going to hit, so we lost a unit there. And again, that puts us at minus 4.6 units on that event. However, since we started tracking, which was October 9th, just a little over 2 months ago now, since we started tracking our bets, we are still sitting at 35.43 units of profit with a 26% ROI. So on betmma.tips, there's about 3,800 handicappers that track on here, and of those 3,800, less than 1,500 are profitable at all. So the vast majority are losers. So the fact that we're up any units at all is great, and the fact that it's 35 units, feeling pretty good about that after only 2 months. So we're gonna keep it going. We're gonna keep doing our tape study. We're gonna keep working hard at learning to get better at this MMA betting game. I'm gonna try to stop making stupid decisions like looking ahead and making those square parlays without doing the tape study. So I hope you'll all stick around for the ride as we continue to do Erik Bets Fights and moving forward on to the next one, gang. We'll see you soon.